I get to speak to a lot of people and talk to them about what they believe or perceive to be good property investments. And a lot of them will bring up areas where there are ultimately quite affordable properties today, but arguably those affordable properties are going to cause some very long-term dramas to those investors. Welcome to the Urban Property Investor. I'm your host, Sam Saggers, here to help you crack the code of real estate wealth. Today's show, we're going to consider some real fundamentals for the future. I want to talk about really making sure you're bulletproof for tomorrow. Of course, when it comes to investment principles, quite often we look at the facts in front of us, but what if things are going to change into the future? How should we be investing? How should we approach playing this game of urban property investment? Today's show should be an absolute cracker, but hey, welcome back regulars. You know the drill. Play the program in double speed, get your life back. And of course, all the episodes I've done are actually lessons on real estate, so feel free to go back in time. But hey, I'm well. I hope you're well. I just got back from walking Raffy, the little Gopnik dog. I've decided on the way to the park, he's really like a little Donald Trump. He wants to take on everything. He wants to mark his territory, have some fun, steal stuff. He's a stealing little Gopnik dog. He steals balls from other people. And then when he returns from the park, he turns into Joe Biden. He can't hear me. He doesn't know his name. He sits down and basically won't get up. He's Sleepy Joe on the way home. So there you go. I've got both Donald Trump and Joe Biden as a dog now. So that's my life. But hey, let's get into it. I think when it comes to property investment, we need to be ready for a different future than what is today. And I've been fascinated with the concept of studying failure. Failure to me is about avoiding problems which for all of us are sitting right in front of us. I think when you study risk and you study the concept of failure, you can be a great property investor. And of course, I think as well in business, business gurus will often teach the kind of red ocean strategy versus the blue ocean strategy. Of course, the red ocean strategy is just really what has always been in the marketplace that is a constant. And the blue ocean strategy is really what is possible in the marketplace and what are the trade-offs out there of a brave new world, the blue ocean. And I do think really a lot of people are starting to live under a rock when it comes to what is going on in this world and really what the future of property actually is. I get to speak to a lot of people and talk to them about what they believe or perceive to be good property investments. And a lot of them will bring up areas where there are ultimately quite affordable properties today, but arguably those affordable properties are going to cause some very long-term dramas to those investors because a lot of those affordable properties are not in climate resilient areas. They are areas which are prone to drought, prone to cyclones, prone to flooding, prone to bushfires, you name it. There's obviously a reason why properties are quite often the price they are. The consensus of real estate is typically built into the price. But if we think about how real estate works today, real estate works in a pretty simple formula. There's a property on the market. It's got a price point. You as a consumer do your research, make an offer on the property. Eventually that property may be sold if you haggle the right price of which the vendor agrees to sell you the property. And of course, in this situation, if you're typically borrowing money, a bank is going to value the property. They're going to send in a valuer. Typically, all banks use valuation groups, private valuers that specialize in looking at the price dynamics of valuation. Other than NAB, which still has their own in-house valuation team that goes out and assesses the worth and value of real estate. And of course, this has been around for a very, very long time. It has been a model of buying real estate. Valuers typically use what is known as direct comparison methodology of valuing real estate. Really what they're trying to do is see that the price you have paid is in line with what other things are selling for in the area, and they may adjust their opinion of the price accordingly. Now, quite often, valuers will have different opinions amongst the different organizations that value properties, just as there's 3 people who have an opinion on buying a property and a different price, 3 real estate agents that often have a price opinion on what they can sell the property for. You'll often see lenders and valuers have different opinions on real estate. But valuation is really a red ocean strategy, price valuation. It's been around for a long period of time. It will be around into the future. There were valuation issues 10 years ago for some properties. There's valuation issues today for some properties, and there'll be valuation issues, I'm sure, 10, 20 years from now on real estate. It's just the game that is played. But what if property is valued differently into the future? This is really that blue ocean concept. We live in a period of time where really we are part of climate change. This concept didn't really exist 10, 20 years ago. There were climate change theories, but really the world has agreed that the climate is changing. By mid-century, the planet will be 1.5 degrees warmer than it is today. And of course, when it comes to this sort of blue ocean strategy of setting yourself up and studying the idea of failure, really we need to consider climate valuation. What will properties be worth today in the current climate? What will they be worth 30 years from now when you pay off your mortgage? And what will they be worth 50, 60, 70 years from today when linking it to the natural environment or the climate? How climate resilient is your real estate? And this is where I have challenges with people who are looking at real estate from a short-term lens. They may be thinking they're going to buy real estate over a long period of time, but when they do their research on a marketplace, there is some real flaws in their thinking because of climate challenges. Now, I think we all just watched basically the Pacific Palisades and Malibu and large proportions of LA burn to the ground. It's real. This stuff is real. And just as I'm recording, there's some terrible flooding going on in places like Townsville and the tropical north of Australia. Roads are cut off, properties are underwater, homes are inundated with flood waters. And of course, if you study where climate challenges are more probable into the future, large proportions of Western Queensland are really going to suffer from a future climate world of soil degradation, lack of water servicing some towns. You've got drought, you've got flooding rains, you've got all sorts of challenges which will impact a large proportion of Australian real estate. So if you study risk, you need to study really the game of climate valuation. And really, the challenge for a lot of property investors today is to not only choose a property based on the first form of valuation, which is really that price metric whereby banks will obviously look at the price bandwidth of your real estate and give you money to borrow to go off and buy real estate. We all get that. That's really a red ocean outcome right now in the real estate marketplace. But what if the bank into the future, and I'm future forecasting based on really studying risk and studying market failure, what if banks into the future actually say to buy a property, we're going to ask you to not only conduct one level of valuation being price, but two other metrics. We're going to ask for and probably create a panel for a climate valuation and a sustainability valuation. What if that was real? What would that do to certain properties' worth in the real estate marketplace? How would that change the market landscape of real estate? Certainly from a climate valuation perspective, if that was to become a thing, and I'm just stargazing into the future of what I believe is going to be more probable than not, is that a lender will not only require for the purpose of a purchase 10 years from now, 15 years from now, a price valuation, but they will probably look for a climate valuation. What will a climate valuation look at? It will look at climate risk at the time of purchase, climate risk during the loan term, and climate risk carrying forward into the latter part of the century. And of course, there's all sorts of climate modeling, particularly around rivers, flood-prone areas, soil degradation areas, coastal erosion. There are all sorts of studies which can form part of a property's climate valuation. And of course, if a property ultimately fails to get a climate valuation whereby at the point of sale it's seen as safe, during the loan term it's seen as safe, and maybe to a degree over the next century of basically the property life cycles theory, then it's very probable that that property would fail to meet standards of lending, or the bank will actually factor in the risk and market failure on the real estate, and instead of lending money at a regular bank rate, they may apply a premium bank rate to borrow money on a property which fails climate valuation. Climate valuation would be far more riskier for a bank than, for example, a valuation coming in $35,000 low for them. That's really chump change. But when you're asking a bank to lend you 80% of the real estate's value, the real estate is likely over the loan term of the length of the loan over a 30-year period to run into a climate challenge, I think it would fail climate valuation. And so again, I speak to all these people all the time, and a lot of the time they will talk to me about, quite inexpensive properties. And typically those inexpensive properties, not all of them, but certainly many of them, are in what I would refer to as areas that would fail climate valuation. They may pass price valuation, but they would fail climate valuation. And of course, we saw this in the Pacific Palisades in Los Angeles, those very, very wealthy homes. Actually, well before the fire, started to suffer from insurers pulling out of lending money on those properties. They also failed climate valuation. It's interesting, obviously, a lot of famous people own those properties. A lot of Hollywood stars, a lot of A-listers own that real estate. And again, there was a couple of people there that built their homes to be very, very fire resilient. They created barriers from the natural world. They created almost like a way to fireproof their houses. And there's all sorts of stories of the right property with the right fireproofing staying intact. And so it may be that a climate valuation also points out that the property would need to have a retrofit to pass muster for both lending and insurance. And I would imagine because of insurance risk, really the new world, if you like, into the future will be very, very, very different. I think we'll all end up paying a proportion more insurance for all of our real estate. I think it's one of the biggest challenges for property investors into the future, the cost of real estate insurance. But equally, I also think that certain properties will just begin to become uninsurable. Now, I've mentioned this before. I'm actually one of the first people in Australia to face a situation where a property I owned right on the beach in Cairns, in one of the northern beaches of Cairns, began to suffer from climate valuation. Really, the insurance around it became so horrendously high that the yield got eradicated. And because that property was subject to, in particular, cyclone risk and flooding risk, being basically on a beach in Cairns, it got basically poleaxed from the concept of a climate valuation, which is really being done already behind the scenes by insurers. It's just whether the banking system also begins to adopt this concept into the future. So what can you do to protect yourself from those concepts? Well, of course, just obviously pick yourself a property, have a look at flood mapping, have a look at bushfire risk, have a look at storm risk, have a look at where you're buying. And for the most part, your quintessential urban areas in Sydney and Melbourne and Perth are perfectly fine areas. Really, I think you'll start to find a lot of climate valuation risk is pushed upon some of our more river cities, our river towns, our smaller communities, where you will struggle to get climate valuation. I know actually here in Sydney on the Nepean River out in the western suburbs of Penrith, some homes on that river now are uninsurable. So what does that do to the value? It makes it pretty tricky for the next person to buy the real estate. The real estate goes from being very, very popular to unpopular. The price goes from being high because it's maybe a nice piece of real estate to much lower because someone buying it will get a failure rating on climate valuation. Now, people can see that today based on climate valuation today, but what about tomorrow? Where is tomorrow headed? And this is where I really think it's critical for you guys listening to consider that the future of this is completely different. Completely different. Existing demand and future demand are going to be different. And I think this brings us to the third form of valuation, which I know and really I'm future forecasting here, will impact real estate. It will be a sustainability valuation. A sustainability valuation. Now, I was just listening to an awesome podcast, and it had the president of the Real Estate Institute of Victoria on it. And it was all about some of the topics I'm talking about today, which is future forecasting. And really that pod lent into sustainability into the future. And really the plausible cost to retrofit real estate, particularly older real estate, to be in line with the climate change situation. Australia has signed up to net zero. And as we've signed up to net zero by 2050, we need to do something about that. You can't just sign up and do nothing. You can't just say you're part of net zero and then do nothing. So really the third form of challenges for property investors, which I've spoken about a lot on this podcast. You can go back to the start of this podcast 4 or 5 years ago, and I was forecasting this will become a thing because I study risk. I study market failure. And when you study market failure, you start to get spidey senses when it comes to seeing that something doesn't quite add up. You've got a country which has signed up to net zero 2050. You've got ESG considerations, environmental, social governance, on business today. So if you have a sizable business, you have to report as part of your tax reporting to government, effectively your supply chain ecosystem. And if your supply chain ecosystem is out of whack with net zero, then you can basically end up getting all sorts of problems coming your way as a business. Obviously, small business is kind of immune to it because small business is not considered, I guess, worth looking at and worth taxing in this space. But big business has to report this. That could be how food is delivered to the office. That could be for big business, the type of lease they take at the moment inside of the CBD. Is the building they're operating from a high energy rated building? This is why you see the big end of town, the massive corporates are making sure they own or rent some of the most energy efficient buildings because it allows them to score well with their effective rating through ESG governance. Now, put yourself in big businesses' position. They've got customers, and their customers are, in this example, for insurance companies, for banks, are basically homeowners. They lend them money and they insure their properties. Now, because that's quite a vertical concept, for those businesses to continue to score well through their ESG compliance, it's very plausible into the future that the measures that they will take will be actually to make sure when they're lending money to properties which are thermally efficient, which score a high sustainability valuation. And of course, there are metrics coming into play today to basically score real estate and to score the real estate based on its thermal efficiency, its ability to, be part of a net zero climate world. One of the challenges here in Australia is Australian real estate is not very good or energy efficient. In Europe, where there's cold winters and temperate summers, they have insulated their homes very, very well over there. In Australia, because we live in this kind of mild climate, for the most part, most homes are not very well insulated. That's why here in Sydney, you will speak to new people coming to the country, particularly from Europe, and they can't believe how cold our houses actually are. They often say it's colder inside the house than outside of the house. And all of that is because we can't heat and cool our homes very, very well in Australia. The way our homes were built over the years never really took into consideration that we would run into a problem where the planet is increasing in its temperature by 1.5% over the next 30 years. So again, the government is going to do things about this. Eventually, I think it'll make its way down to those that own inefficient, less sustainable real estate. And I do believe there may even be future retrofitting costs on that real estate. What could that look like? Well, the president of the Real Estate Institute of Victoria, which obviously there's real estate institutes all over Australia, they all sort of talk to each other, kind of alluded to that. Would it be unreasonable to consider that when you're buying a inefficient energy rated home, that there would be a sustainability valuation done on the property, and at the point of lending money on the property, the bank would also consider having to lend you a renovation amount to be spent on retrofitting sustainability into the property. And again, like, these are some of the real future forecasting when it comes to how to adopt buying real estate. Will these future capital costs at the point of sale become a real thing? Will we have not only price valuation, but sustainability valuation? Not only sustainability valuation, but will we have climate valuation? All three coming together to really prove whether a property is worthy of being part of the economic future for an investor. And again, like, at the moment, it's all just thought, it's all just theory. But again, as a property investor, your job is to study risk. Your future is connected to the real estate. One day you're going to want to retire from property, and one day you're going to use the asset that you buy today to pay for a future for you tomorrow. And if the real estate you buy today ends up being a problem for your future, i.e. it fails climate valuation, at the point of sale it's not thermally efficient real estate, and all of a sudden the person buying that real estate has to factor in, they have to do a $100,000 climate upgrade, sustainability upgrade on the real estate. Well, of course, that's going to be factored into the price of the point of offer. And again, these are just mere theoretical concepts, but for you as a property investor, and again, going back to the red ocean, blue ocean strategy, if you want an uncontested marketplace into the future where the competition is irrelevant to you into the future, that blue ocean strategy, then really you've got to consider these three real pillars of what next for real estate in Australia. Again, I think it's a worthy, really incredible conversation. Obviously, consumers today will look at renovated properties or properties with decent sustainability features to them and pay a premium for it. There's studies around this stuff. which again, really, if you think of the high cost of renovating at the moment, most renovated properties will also be subject to sustainability improvements. And of course, for a consumer, that also is a great way to bulletproof yourself from this form of valuation. So again, it may mean that the best way to make money out of real estate, if you own existing properties, which is basically failing from a sustainability perspective, is to renovate them and push the value, and the market will obviously even pay for that because again, that is one of the desire lines that I think the market is really looking for at the moment, which is pretty incredible. So food for thought, as they say, food for thought. I don't want to be accused of not giving you the full facts. Certainly from a climate valuation perspective, I would say that that's the highest level of risk, followed by sustainability, then price. So again, argy-bargy over a $10,000 here or $20,000 there is at the point of purchase is nothing compared to waking up 20 years from now with a property which can't get insurance, which is in a climate affected area that has no sustainability elements to it. To me, that would be more risky than accidentally paying 30 grand more than what you should for a property. Obviously, if you can get the property part right, that's even better, but I'm just trying to put it in context that when you buy real estate, you are buying tomorrow, not just today. And it's very important to align yourself with the right real estate for tomorrow. If you're having a short-term love affair with real estate, a little affair with property, and you're just going to do some property trading and maybe flip a property or buy something for a couple of years, maybe some of this stuff doesn't carry weight. But if you're going to hunker down with assets, you want to make sure that the assets can meet you over your time horizon later in life with the right characteristics. And the three characteristics from valuation will be not only price, there'll be climate and sustainability. All right. Well, thanks very much for tuning in, and I'll pause there, and we'll catch you again on the next episode as we talk more about property investment. Thanks for tuning in to the Urban Property Investor. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube so you never miss an episode. I'd love for you to rate the show and share it with your family and friends. Let's spread the word about property investing. Stay connected between episodes on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And check out the rest of our podcast network at positivementor.com.au. And if you're serious about growing your property portfolio, don't miss our complimentary Property Investor Nights. Register now via the link in the show notes. See you next time.